appreciate the sentiment behind the amendment offered. I keep hearing a lot when we talk about CEP that it's this pristine election tool, that it's stopped dark money, that it's stopped the shady business of the past, and yet, under CEP, an organization in this state was fined the largest fine in the history of elections. In the history. Mr. Speaker, it's shocking to me when I keep hearing these things over and over again. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, is there a fiscal note filed for this amendment through you?
Representative Lesser.
Through you, Mr. Speaker. I need 1 second to answer that.
House will stand at ease. House will come back to order. Representative Lesser, I believe you were asked if there was a fiscal note. Representative Lesser.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to apologize for the delay to the gentlelady through you. We did get a report from the Office of Fiscal Analysis. There is no fiscal impact of this amendment.
Representative Gibran, you still have the floor.
Through you, Mr. Speaker. So is there an official fiscal note filed on the system from the Office of Fiscal Analysis through you?
Representative Lesser.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I did receive a fiscal note from the Office of Fiscal Analysis. I don't know whether it's online or not, but I'm happy to make copies for all members of the body. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I question whether this amendment is properly before us since there is no fiscal note filed.
There is a fiscal note filed, ma'am.
Where is it on the system through you, Mr. Speaker?
It's in Representative Lesser's hand, and he has offered to make copies for you. Would that suffice?
Mr. Speaker, I would make the motion that this is not properly before us this evening. The fiscal note is not on the system. It's not properly filed.
You're making a point of order.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Yes,
House
I
will stand
am.
at ease. House will come back to order. I understand paper copies have been given, so your point of order is not well taken, ma'am. I have been aware all evening and morning, because we're in a special session, that LCO has been using a 5-digit ID on Senate A, Senate B, the fiscal notes, and the system only allows for a 4-digit number. So that's what's going on, and we're going to continue to have that issue because the system will need to be, yeah, Ann Clark's giving me the nod, is going to need to be fixed to allow for 5-digit numbers. So there is a fiscal note, and that is properly before us. You still have the floor, Representative Gibran.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the fiscal note was just handed to me, and I appreciate that. And I see that technically it has no fiscal impact. I don't have experience running PACs or having anything to do with political action committees. My question to the proponent is, what exactly is the rules for PACs as somebody who may have some familiarity with that process? I was wondering if you could shed some light on that through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Lesser, do you care to respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you to the gentlelady. Through you, a political committee may be established under state law that is allowed to accept or make expenditures in compliance with state law. And what we are doing tonight is amending those statutes. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gibran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Finally, I would say the underlying bill makes the very difficult decision to prioritize tax dollars on our vulnerable, on our elderly, and on other places, Care for Kids, home PACE programs, senior meals. Our bipartisan budget does not prioritize bumper stickers, pens, pot holders, posters, and things like that. We have to have a mechanism for candidates, both Democrat, Republican, Green Party, Independent, Libertarian, and in my case, the Chatham Party. I have a very active third-party organization in my district to be able to raise funds to run effective campaigns. That's what our underlying bill does, and it's for that reason that I urge all of my colleagues to reject the amendment. Thank you.
No, she had. Representative Bitzke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've just been through a very historic vote with regard to this budget. We have just passed the exact same version of the budget that the Senate passed. Same version. And now we've got in front of us an amendment to that. And for those who don't know, if this amendment or any amendment passes, we will no longer have the exact same version of the budget as the Senate has. That would mean that whatever we pass...
Representative Bitzke,
yes,
please don't refer to what the Senate does or doesn't. We've had several complaints from both sides of the aisle that you should stick to the merits of House Amendment B. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would say I'm certainly not going to ascribe any motives with regard to any amendments. But at 2:30 in the morning, I apologize if it appears that way. But I would indicate that any amendment, including this one, if this amendment passes, this amendment would change the underlying bill, and having this underlying bill changed would mean that it would have to go back to the Senate. And I would ask my colleagues not to do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Lesser for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the second time. I appreciate the comments of some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I would just state for the record that the Citizens Election Fund at present is not funded by taxpayer dollars, not one penny of taxpayer funds, but rather through unclaimed property. What this amendment would seek to do, though, is clarify that those pens, hats, and bumper stickers that we all run our campaigns on are funded by private contributions, as the House of Representatives just voted to do, but not funded by corporate contributions, not funded by special interests seeking to influence what happens in this building, this chamber, seeking to use their economic clout to influence us. And my good friend on the other side of the aisle just mentioned the importance of respecting each other's motives. And there is, I believe, a drafting error that says that that has the practical effect. I do not think this was the intent, but it has the practical effect of saying that if in a prior campaign, in 2016, 2014, 2012, 2010, a member of this body or a member of the state Senate embezzled public property, that is no longer a crime. And this clarifies the intent that I heard the good representative, the honorable ranking member Appropriations Committee say so many hours ago, that was not the intent of this bill. This amendment clarifies that the intent is not to legalize embezzlement of public property. I think that is an important enough thing that we might want to call the state Senate back up to clarify that that wasn't their intent either. I don't believe it was either. I urge adoption.
Thank you, sir. Will you remark further? If not, staff and guests come to the wall of the House. Members, take your seats. The machine will be open.
The House of Representatives is voting by roll. Members to the chamber.
Take a tally. And the clerk will announce the tally.
LCO number 10107, as amended or designated House Amendment Schedule B. Total number voting 150. Necessary for adoption 76. Those voting yea 74. Those voting nay 76. Absent and not voting 1.
The amendment fails.